everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tea, Tentacles, and Talk, cozy conversations about LGBTQ plus romance. I'm your host, Chloe Archer. And before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of updates and some news with me. First and foremost, I want to talk about the two awards I recently won from the Paranormal Romance Guild's Reviewer Choice Awards. My book, Can't Help Falling in Love with an Alien, Tentacular Tales #2, won Best LGBT Contemporary Romance at the awards, and my series, Tentacular Tales, won second place for Best LGBT Contemporary Romance Series. So thank you so much to everyone who voted for me and supported me. I am truly touched and really honored to have won these awards. Other news, I have sent The Gargoyle and the Romance Writer off to my editor, so that will be coming in the pipeline very soon, and I will have an update on the release, but we're looking at end of March or very beginning of April, so I'll keep you posted. Without further ado, on to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tea, Tentacles, and Talk, cozy conversations about LGBTQ plus romance. And today I have another fabulous guest with me. Today I am talking with Lynn Van Dorn, aka Virginia Kelly. And let me quickly read her bio for you here. Her bio is in the first person. So Lynn says about herself, I grew up in Ohio, raised by two parents transplanted from Florida. I'm an only child and I have no close relatives, so I often write about families out of fascination and observation. Siblings especially captivate me, never having had any of my own. The very first thing I wanted to be when I grew up was a writer. Same. That was replaced by fashion designer, ooh, vet, until I learned that I was allergic to anything with fur, chemist, doctor, lawyer, and finally pharmacist at age 13. I stuck with the last one, but I never gave up a love of writing. The first fiction I wrote outside of a class assignment was X-Files fan fiction. Represent! I met my two best friends through that world and moved to Chicago to be near them. I gave up writing for about a decade while I raised my son, but started writing again when he got to his preteens. I started with erotic short stories, then was inspired by one of my X-Files friends to write a book because, and I quote, if Nicholas Sparks and E.L. James can do it, so can we. I started playing around with the idea that had knocked around in my head for ages. Out of that, my first book, Damage Control, was born. It's a crazy 180,000 words and took me a year to write. I'm not the fastest writer in the world, and I have a full-time job as a pharmacist, but I have nevertheless managed to publish several solo books, and I've collaborated with Piper Scott, who's also been on the show, on 8, our M-Preg Dragon series, Forbidden Desires. I love that series. The book I'm publishing in March, Frostbite, will be my 15th solo published work. Lynn, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. What a bio. That's great. Readers of mine know I'm also a big X-Files nerd.
That's
It shows up in my work, especially my sci-fi stuff. No, that's awesome. And Piper was on the show recently, and yeah, we were talking a little bit about that series, and definitely one of my faves. Um, okay, well, in our sort of tea and talk, I always, encourage my guests to bring a beverage. I see you've got a mug with you.
I do.
What did you bring to sip on today while we
I
talk?
have lemon lift Bigelow tea with
Ooh.
with honey and Splenda
Oh, nice. That sounds good.
because cold.
Ah, good for the throat.
Good for
Yes.
the throat. Yes, indeed.
I I am just doing water this afternoon because I have had like too many cups of coffee today. I'm a little like so I was like, okay, I should actually probably hydrate a little bit.
Probably it's not a bad idea. This is like my fourth tea for the day, I think. Maybe fourth.
Oh,
Could be fifth.
nice.
Could be fifth. I lose count after a while.
Well, if it's an herbal one, you can kind of drink
Oh,
as
it's
many
not
as
herbal. It's totally black tea.
Oh, it's well, black tea does at least have a little less
Yes, it's not
caffeine
like
than
drinking
the
coffee.
coffee. No, I have two different Nespresso makers because I have a problem. Uh, one of them is like the original style, and one of the other one is like the Virtua one. And like I just like get real excited about playing with, oh, which one am I gonna have today? Maybe I'll have one of each, So yeah, it's I'm working on it.
I'm
But
like slowly building a kitchen into my office.
ooh,
It says, in my bathroom because it's the best place to have anywhere set up and with electricity. Although it sounds like a really bad idea, but anyway, I have a hot water kettle. I have a Keurig, and I have a small microwave.
oh wow. So you're all set. You can
Oh
be in
yeah,
there, the
oh yeah.
zombie apocalypse happens, you could
Oh
still
yeah.
write your books.
Yeah, this way I can like stay in the zone without hopefully being bothered. Although
Right,
occasionally my husband will come in and I'm like, dude, it's just in the
right,
zone. And then he'll
right.
give me this
Don't
look like,
mess with
but I'm your
flow.
husband. You need to understand kind of thing.
Well, you've been doing this for a while, and I would really love to, because I'm a newer writer, and so I always love talking with people at multiple stages of their careers and thinking a little bit about that. Can you tell us kind of your journey? Sort of, I know in your bio it kind of indicated like you wanted to be a writer from pretty early on, but kind of, in your trajectory once you started writing again after your son got into high school and everything, how has your journey kind of progressed to now?
I learned an awful lot. Not so much about writing itself,
Hmm.
but about publishing and
Yeah.
marketing and all of those
Right.
lovely things. A lot of my writing issues were actually knocked out of me during the X-Files fanfic days because
Mm,
I got together with a group of writers who were all extremely critical. I mean, we
mm.
did it on purpose. We used to call it the machete beta,
Ah.
and we would ruthlessly have these of like, I hate to say literature, but whatever, um, just gone through by other people. But it taught me to take criticism. It
Mhm.
taught me to evaluate criticism correctly. It taught me a lot of things as far as that kind of thing goes, and it was extremely valuable. So when I like, for instance, I turned damage control into Courtney Bassett actually, she edited it for me because we were friends actually.
Hmm.
And she read, I sort of like shyly said, oh, I have this book that I've written. And she like later said, oh my God, I was so afraid to read it because what if it sucked? But it actually, she said it was very clean. And part of that is just because that's how I write. I'm not one of those people that like dumps words on the screen and then goes back and edits.
Oh,
I very deliberately write every single thing. I might go back and fiddle a tiny bit here and there, or
yeah.
tweak or whatever. But if it goes on the page, 99% of the time it's going to stay there.
Wow, that's really interesting. So, I mean, I guess can you kind of talk a little bit about your process? Are you sort of more of a plotter then, or
I
where
am
do you fit?
a what they have, planter.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so mostly I pants it. I mean, I have a vague idea of what a book is going to be about when I start.
Hmm.
Sometimes I have more of an idea than others, but I usually at least have a hook on who the characters are and potentially where I want them to go.
Yeah.
And then I kind of write each chapter as I go. I write in order. I do not write out of order.
Oh,
I
wow.
cannot
Okay.
write out of order.
Hmm.
It doesn't work with how my brain works.
Yeah.
Um, and I before starting a chapter, I will plot that particular chapter out.
Mm.
So if I can't just sit down and write, I have to know what happens before I write.
Oh, okay.
I'm one of those people that does thinky thoughts, and then once I know what's going to happen, then it's fine. I can just write it out, no problem.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I know
Yeah,
it's weird. It's very weird.
everybody's quite different, and that's what I love about it. And I try to sort of just encourage and remind aspiring or new authors who are
There's no
tuning
one
in.
way. There is
Yeah,
no one way. That's the
100%.
other thing. I totally have learned that as well, is that what works for one person does not necessarily work for another, and
Yeah.
forcing yourself to do something that does not feel natural is never going to work.
Yep. Oh yeah, exactly. And yeah, I one of the things that held me back for many years in my writing was that it wasn't until like a few years ago that I discovered the magic of dictation. And I write primarily through dictation. And I was an immediate natural with dictation. And I thought, oh my God, this is the most amazing, easy thing in the world. I didn't realize that, like, for some people, it is just impossible
I
to.
am the impossible person.
Mm,
I mean, I have tried it several times just because
yeah,
it would make my life so much easier, and I
right.
can't do it. It's almost like when I speak, my brain shuts off. And
Oh,
so I can't plot ahead and talk at the same time.
yeah.
I can write and plot ahead,
Mm,
but then I'll pause between sentences sometimes as far as that goes.
right.
But no, I've tried it. I've tried it several times. It just does not work for me. But
Yeah.
it works. But again, I know several people it does, and
Yeah.
I wish it worked for me, but
Right.
no, it totally does not. Despite several attempts. I mean,
Mhm.
let's put it this way, I was smart enough never to buy the Dragon software and the microphone and whatever, but I did it. I
Right.
picked several different like free programs to try,
Yeah.
and it's not the software that's the issue. It's
Yeah.
totally me. It's my brain does not work with dictation.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting in terms of why it does or does not work for some people. I definitely think it has
It's
to
how
do
your
with
brain works.
our brain
It's
chemistry and
definitely how your
all
brain
of that. Yeah. Whereas for me, I mean, I can type on the computer, but it's largely a two steps forward, one step back kind of process for me because it activates like my inner editor and I just slow down to like a snail crawl trying to like and I'll go over the same chapter like 20 times kind of thing. And so
Oh,
for
I know.
me like yeah, for me dictation helps me kind of let go of that and then
Which
go
totally
back.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
write on my phone most of the time.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
about maybe 80% of what I write's on my phone.
See, okay.
100% of damage control, which is that 180K nonsense, was
Right.
mostly at work, but not completely at work. On
Wow.
my, because I was working nights and it was a store that I worked at that was
Yeah.
now. There's no time to write at my current store, but
Right.
so I wrote on my phone, and it was also a way to keep it secret.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Because at the time, the home computer was in the living room, and
Mm.
I don't have the ability to write with other people around. I can feel their presence.
Mm, right, right. So you're not a coffee shop writer.
Oh God, no! I don't know how people do it. I have no clue how people do it. But yeah, and I feel most comfortable on my phone.
Hmm.
And I can do it really quickly. Although I think a lot of it has to do with, I mean, A, I know how to type, so I know
Yeah.
where all the letters are, but also more importantly, I use a lot of predictive text.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That can help for sure. I just I'm constantly amazed by the things that people can like write on their phone. Part of mine is like a vision issue that I have trouble with stuff up close anyway, but like the other issue for me is I don't know if it I will admit I am not the most athletically gifted person in the world or coordinated individual. I cannot ever seem to type fast on these little like phone screens, right? Like I am always somehow like I'm aiming for the letter and I somehow barely touch this other one. And so like it just gives me a bunch of gibberish half the time. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I do not have the knack for that.
I
So
do have a very large phone, so that does help.
oh, okay. So kind of a little closer to a tablet, maybe.
I've got a currently a Note 10 Plus, but I'm gonna probably upgrade to the whatever the hell they've got now. I've had it for close to 5 years. But the thing is, when I break in a
Mm.
phone, I don't want to have to like break in a new one.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm
So
too old for that at this
like,
point. I'm
like
like, oh
I've got it
God.
all broken in. It's pretty much when the
Yeah.
battery won't hold any charge anymore is when it's
Right,
like,
exactly. Yep, yep, yep. I am in that exact same generation. I'm like, oh God. But but I think
yes,
the long and short of this is for our aspiring or new authors is try a bunch of different ways
yes,
to write
try
and
different
find
things.
different things that work for you because you might be surprised. And there are, I feel like, increasingly more and more tools every year, right, that come
Yes.
out. If you are somebody who loves to plot intricately, there's Plotter, right? If you're somebody who likes to really break your manuscript up into parts, there's Scrivener, right? Like there's
Yeah,
all of
I cannot do Scrivener. A Piper used Scrivener. And I don't know how, it's like it's voodoo. I swear to God, it's like voodoo.
I can't use it either.
I
And
used Google.
Plotter terrified me. I took one look at it and I ran. I was like, no.
I for a long time I wrote in Google Docs, but then I moved over to Word because I just got tired of transferring everything from
Yeah.
Docs into Word. And so I'm like, and also the deciding factor actually was that Word updated their app for their phone, and it
Mm,
was once they okay because their old app when they first came out with their app, it was terrible. I could
yeah.
write with the Google Docs app, no problem. That's what I
Yeah.
wrote the first book on.
Okay.
But when the Microsoft Word, they had their app and it was awful, just awful. And
Mm.
then they did something and
Oh.
they rewrote the entire app. And
Oh,
so it has pretty much almost the exact same functionality as you could do almost everything on the app that you can do in Word,
oh,
except for some
wow.
of the weird fiddly shit.
Yeah.
But you can do so many things. And
That's so cool.
so once they once they made the app user friendly and
Yeah.
made it so I can actually italicize things and bold things and
Mm.
it'll even let me auto indent. I mean, all this. It also does the little curly
Oh,
the curly quotes.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, that's so I switched over to Word, and that's
That's
currently what I
cool.
use.
Huh, I didn't even know they had an app.
Again, phone person.
Right, right. Yeah, I know a lot of young people who definitely do everything on their phones, and I'm like, oh, I'd much rather do it on my computer.
It actually is a necessity thing because I have worked in an environment which is a retail pharmacy, which we will not name,
Uh,
where the only thing allowed to me in the pharmacy is a phone. I
yeah,
can't take a laptop
right.
into work with me, and I certainly can't use the work computers to write.
Yeah,
That's
right,
a terrible bad idea on so many
right.
levels.
Well,
So many levels. So I just got really comfortable with my phone, I think. But I've always
yeah,
ever since smartphones came around, you pretty much had to pry one out of my hand.
yeah. Well, I think that's the case for a lot of people these days. I think we're kind of almost cybernetically fused to our
Yeah.
smartphones. And I mean, I remember the days when I used to have to print out MapQuest directions to get places. And I'm like, I could not live without my phone now. And it's GPS telling me where to go because I'm horrible at maps and directions. And like, I literally need the
Well,
app.
picture this. I moved to Chicago, to be with
Yeah.
my friends,
Yeah.
and I was brand new pharmacist in this pharmacy chain.
Yeah.
And the first thing they do is they make you do of like a floating position. You float between stores and fill in
Oh, sure.
whoever's not there. So I am new to Chicago and I am new to the area, and suddenly I'm being sent all over the freaking place. And this was 2001.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there was a lot of map questing. And I also got one of those like those maps that like does like the area. It like had like 50 pages and it was just Chicago.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was helpful too.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I know, but like now I'm just like, oh, the time I save and the stress I save myself just like being able to rely on my GPS.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
my dad, he still loves an old school, like those giant maps. Like he's going to take a road trip. He pulls out the Rand McNally,
My mom was like that. Yeah.
and
She
I'm like, But I could never make heads or tails of them. I was just like,
I've always been actually good at navigation. We did a lot of traveling when I was a kid. Not only did we go to Florida a lot because that's where what few relatives I had were in Florida. So we went to Florida at least once a year. But we also did a lot of car traveling with a camper. And so
okay.
I got extremely good at reading maps. And I'm also very good at like cardinal orientation. So like if I orient myself with north, south, east, and west, I can usually keep where I'm going in my head.
Okay.
Which I know
Wow,
is something
that's impressive. So
but I'm
you
not very
you
good
can
with
officially
left.
be,
I'm
huh?
not very good right and left.
Oh.
And oh, my other weird thing, which actually my weird quirky thing that everybody works upon, I use my mouse upside down.
Really?
Yeah, I use
How
my
does
mouse
that
upside down.
work?
Well,
With your finger on the roller?
no, actually, my finger's usually at the top of the top of the thing right
Oh,
here. I usually hold it
yeah.
sort of like this.
Okay.
And it's because if I use it correctly, the arrow doesn't go in the right direction.
Oh, wow.
And so, because I'm also bad with my rights and my lefts, I
Mm.
think they're connected. But this is my theory, my very unscientific theory. But that's the weird thing. That's probably another reason why I like using my phone is because I don't have to worry about an upside down mouse.
Right, right. Well, yeah. I mean, this I think really raises the question for me in terms of, so if you have a full-time job as a pharmacist, and I'm sure, especially these days, I know that the workload for pharmacists is kind of insane.
Yeah.
How and when do you fit writing into your schedule? I know you talked about kind of like when you can kind of find time on the job, being able to use your phone, but I'm assuming that you have to have other times. Like, how do you fit it in?
Okay. First of all, I work. I'm no longer working days, and when I worked
Oh,
days, right about the time I published my very first book, Damage Control, I was the store I was at, the 24-hour store I was at,
yeah.
excuse me, they made it no longer 24 hours, which I
Ah,
mean, I kind of can understand because I was
right.
able to write a book there. Um, and I did days for maybe about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was so stressed out that I was just ready to quit, just
Yeah.
absolutely ready to quit because I went through all of COVID and all of that on days.
Oh,
To give you an example, I was so stressed out and so tired and so everything that when I did get COVID, I
yeah.
was like celebrating because it meant I got 10 days off work.
Right.
And
Mm,
now, granted, I didn't pretty much do anything for those days except for sleep. It's not like I had
right.
anything accomplished, but just being
Right.
able to sleep for 10 days in a row
Yeah.
was amazing to me. So that kind of gives you an idea of how bad it was.
Right.
When another overnight position opened up, I jumped on it,
Yeah.
and it's much less stressful. And it's also 7 days in a row and then 7 days off.
Oh, wow.
Currently,
Okay.
we're in an off cycle. This is my week off.
Yeah.
I'm more or less transitioned back to days, although I've always been a night owl.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's like not a problem. But okay, so as for when I write, I have a couple different like during my work week.
Mm.
I will often go to work early and sit in my car and I'll write before I go in.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
then I will sometimes if I have an idea that I just got to get out, will write over my lunch break, but
Mm.
usually not that much because it's only a half hour, so I don't get a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
And then when I get home, I will go to bed taking my phone with me and will write in bed.
Wow. Okay.
So that's how I do get writing accomplished on my weeks on. The weeks off,
Mm.
I don't really do anything all day. I have actually in some ways a little bit harder time motivating myself because I'm like, I can do whatever I want. I'm free. So that's my one issue is like sort of buckling down and doing it. But other than that, that's when I
Hmm.
get the bulk of everything done is on my week off.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about how you sort of balance two pen names. Why did you end up creating the two essentially?
Well, it was kind of a whim. Um,
Mm.
I mean, at the time, Piper had been like, okay, so we had sort of our little thing about how we got together was just such a jokey fluke anyway.
Mm.
And I don't know if she told the story on
I
the thing.
don't think she did, or if she did, I'm not remembering it right now.
Well, I will have to maybe tell it then.
Okay, tell us, tell us,
Um,
tell us.
but when we started writing the first book, Clutch, I was thinking that I probably should have a another name because I wrote everything else under it was strictly contemporary,
Oh,
contemporary, contemporary, with no magic or fantasy or whatever.
yeah,
And I,
right.
at the time, wanted to get more into writing some fantasy. And
Mm,
I've kind of been slow to that. Well, a lot of it is because the dragons have really sort of sucked up like most of
yeah,
that.
right.
Um, but yeah, I really have enjoyed writing fantasy, but I thought it would be smart to have two different names. Now,
Sure.
in retrospect, I probably would have just kept it with Lynn, but at the time it made sense. And I'm
Hmm.
kind of like, whatever at this point. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it's like I've already got Virginia Kelly.
Mm.
And so any fantasy I write, I'm just going to put under Virginia Kelly. Anything that's contemporary, I'm going to leave under Lynn. I am, however, going to put on my Virginia books, my solo Virginia books,
Yeah.
Lynn Van Dorn writing as Virginia Kelly.
Ah, sure, sure. Yeah, I find this really interesting because everybody's different. I know some people who have like multiple pen names. I don't know how they juggle them all. I've been kind of debating about whether to create another pen name in the next year or two because like I have some things I want to write that are not quite as like humorous rom-commy as most of the stuff that I write under my Chloe Archer brand. It would be a little bit more serious, like urban fantasy and stuff like that. But the interesting thing is like I've polled a number of readers in my group and some other places, and a lot of them told me don't don't have another name.
Yeah. If I
They
had to do over again, I probably would not do it. But it's one of those
hmm,
things where it's done
yeah,
and
of
I'm
course, of course.
I'm
Yeah.
forging forward with it. Yeah, in retrospect, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, it's been
If
interesting. So,
when I made it up, there wasn't a lot of crossover between contemporary and
right,
um fantasy. Now there is. There's
right.
like I mean Nora Fegas would be a great example.
Yeah,
And there's a couple other ones too, but she's the one that first one comes to mind who
yeah,
writes um whatever genre under her
right,
single name.
right.
So but again, that's it was one of those things. I zigged, I could have zagged.
Yeah. No,
Sometimes
no,
you
I
just
mean, I
gotta
don't think
roll the
it's a
dice and
bad thing.
oh,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I mean, would it make my life more easy if I wrote under Lynn? Oh, fuck yeah, it would. I'm sorry, you may have to edit.
No, 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 no. We're 18 and over channel. It's all
Okay, okay.
good.
I do tend to swear a lot. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it would make my life easier. It totally would. But on the other hand, there is a little bit of being able to like categorize all the fantasies will fall under the Virginia page. All
Right.
of the Lynn books obviously are on the Lynn page, but I do put Lynn as an author on the Virginia books.
Ah, okay. Okay.
They basically have two authors. Virginia Kelly is number one, but Lynn Van Dorn is the secondary author.
Ah, okay. Okay.
So that
That
way it
makes
still links it back to Lynn.
mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit. I've been really interested lately about tropes. And
Okay. I love
um,
tropes.
yes, so tell me, what are some of your favorite tropes to write and your favorite tropes to read? Do they overlap or are there some areas of difference?
There's definitely areas of difference.
Ooh, okay.
I, it's okay. So as far as like tropes go, it's not something where I go in deliberately and say I'm going to do this particular trope,
Sure, sure.
with the possible exception of the book I'm writing now, but that's a different kettle of fish. But the tropes kind of come about as I develop the characters.
Yeah, okay.
Um, but like for instance, I've never written one of those okay, like mafia books where like the dark mafia books where the mafia boss comes in, he's a horrible person, but he takes
Right.
over like the whatever guy and like sweeps him off to another, and I'm like, I know this is awful. I know it's awful. And not by awful written. I mean awful by this is not something should happen in real life at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Not very
But
consensual.
exactly. But I love reading them so much. And
Mm.
one of my, if I could, in fact, if I could write like her, I totally would. Is Alessandra Hazard, and the reason I would write like her is because she probably makes money from this
Oh, right.
because her books sell like so well. But they're
Yeah.
very cracky, and it's difficult. I've been reading them since like for a while now, and I keep trying to see if I can figure out what the magical crack is, and
Mm.
I haven't quite like cracked the code as far as that goes. But yeah,
Secret sauce is unclear right now. The
yeah,
recipe
exactly.
is big.
I just, but yeah, I love the sort of the Cinderella story. I
Oh,
love
sure.
but there's other ones too. I mean, I'm trying to think of a trope that I haven't written at this point.
Mm.
I tend to invert them a lot,
Oh,
or subvert them, I suppose you could say.
okay. Fun.
So, as an example, I wrote a book by one and only true daddy book because
Oh.
Daddy Issues is not a daddy book. Yeah, I know. That's another one. I probably should have named it differently. I've thought very long and hard about renaming it, and it just seems like it's
Mm.
more bother than what it's worth. So I
Right?
just,
Yeah.
it's like it's been like almost 5 years at this point. And I'm like,
Mm.
so, but at any rate, yeah, Daddy Issues not a daddy book. My one daddy book is Wild at Heart, and in it the daddy is actually a like 40 some year old like virgin, um, and
Mm.
who knows nothing about anything, and he basically captures he doesn't really capture, he finds a poor little twink lost in the woods, and takes him
Love
home,
it.
like nurses him back to health, and eventually,
Ah,
the daddy thing comes about as far, but
yeah.
definitely the more sexually aggressive one is definitely the bottomy twink.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No,
So
I love that kind of
because
subversion.
it's like I like the idea of not all bottoms are passive, not all
Yeah.
tops are like really alpha or whatever,
Right, right.
that kind of thing. I do like sort of like twisting things a little bit just
Hmm.
because I I like that. I like the twisting.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% agree. I love that. Like I don't read a ton of, for instance, like BDSM, but like one of my favorites is Alexis Hall's For Real,
It's a
where
great,
like
yeah, it's
Dom
a
is like a really young, inexperienced guy and he's short and he's skinny and and the sub is like a much older, bigger guy. And
yeah,
their dynamic was, it just sucked me in. Like there was so much like, well, I guess I'm also a character reader and like the emotional dynamic. And so I like when there's also that subversion. So they're not just like replicating a kind of sometimes tired and repetitive role, right?
yes.
They're really giving us something different in the story. So yeah, no, I love that kind of stuff.
I'm
Uh,
also a sucker for an angry twink. I'm a
oh,
total sucker for an angry twink. Um,
well, I'm also like an anime fan and have been for many years. And so like I kind of liken that to sort of the tsundere character in anime, right? Is a little bit like that a lot of times, especially in kind of the BL genre and stuff.
yeah, it's
So
like if you've ever watched Yuri on Ice, which I'm sure you have,
yes.
the Virgin Yuri is my typical like angry twink
Yes, yes. I love it. Oh my
with his knife beat.
God. Well, I want to make sure we have some time to talk about your upcoming release because this sounds really good. So this is Frostbite, and it is an MM fantasy romance. And I'm just going to read the kind of mini blurb here, which contains a worn down young man, a world weary vampire, blood sucking Nazi fiends, an unscrupulous blood sommelier, unsupportive family, an extremely large bathtub inside a bat cave, a Russian human servant not to be trifled with, and plenty of blood. This is going to be a standalone with an HEA, and this one's coming under your Virginia Kelly pen name. Tell us a little bit about, how this book came to be and what you were trying to do with that.
Okay, so there was a meme that was going around a couple years ago, and I've seen it since. And essentially, it's what if what if it turned out your landlord was a vampire and you couldn't make rent, so you like basically were like, I'll open a vein for you kind of thing.
Right.
And so that's what it's based on.
Ooh, interesting.
I have a vampire landlord.
Ooh, I like it. And so some hapless young guy down on his luck. Okay. All right, you've sold me already. I'm like,
So I've got a human servant that is wanting to retire
yeah.
and a vampire who needs a new one. He also
Mm,
needs a superintendent for his building. So
right.
so two birds with one stone kind of thing.
Okay. Well, what was your favorite part of writing this book, and what did you find most challenging?
Um, okay, let's see here. I I love writing the the interactions between the characters. Ivan is my very grumpy uh, Russian human servant that my vampire picked up as a child when they were going through the Russian
Mm.
Revolution.
Oh,
And
wow.
it basically has raised him and has been with him like all this time.
Yeah.
And he's much older than what he appears, but he has never taken the whole true servant thing, which means he's not immortal.
Ah.
And he's decided he wants to retire. So, but he's got this very like he's there's something about Russian characters in particular that I quite love because
Mm.
they're so very matter of factly badass like all the time. I mean, like they drink tea like a badass. They do everything like a badass.
Right.
And
Love
so
it.
Ivan is very much like that. And and meanwhile we have our other two characters. We have Nick, who is our human servant wannabe, and he's very sweet and kind of young and not even a bit, and he also doesn't really have a good idea of his own self-worth.
Mm.
And on the other hand, we have Dima, who is otherwise he's Vladimir, otherwise known as Dima,
Yeah.
and he's a very, 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 very old vampire,
Mm.
has gone agoraphobic. So
Oh, wow.
he has not left his basement in like since the mid 80s.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yes, he's become agoraphobic.
And
And he also,
outdated in his fashion.
yes, and essentially he looks like he is very young. I
Oh,
mean, not like 12 young, but he looks like he's maybe
right.
barely out of high school, even though he's extremely old,
Yeah.
like 9,000 years old,
Oh, wow. Okay.
like back in the Neolithic times old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's
So
been
is
a
he
lot of
sort of like
research about
cynical? Has he gotten that kind of cynical, like
not so
nihilistic
much
sort of
cynical,
quality?
but I guess more world weary.
Mm,
There's
okay.
one passage that's my favorite in the book, and he talks about how during some of the plague years, he just walked into the ocean and walked around for a long time in the quiet of the deeps of the ocean
Oh,
because
wow.
he needed to get away from all the death.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Well, this sounds really, really fascinating. And it does make me want to ask here because I'm always intrigued by the kind of research we often have to do as authors. So tell me a little bit about what was the weirdest or most bizarre thing you had to Google for this particular book?
Um, Neolithic bats.
Oh, wow. How are Neolithic bats different from contemporary ones?
Just different species.
Oh, wow.
But as it turns out, I did not find quite what I wanted in real life, so
Mm.
sort of I'm sort of mashing a few things together to get what I want.
Okay. Well, this is the
I mean, if there's
beauty of
vampires, I
fiction.
can make up bats too.
Right, exactly, exactly. I mean, this is why this is also partly why I don't write contemporary. I have a tendency to want to like create all these things that don't exactly exist.
I'm so much of like for instance, I if I need to know like what material like a um uh a particular outfit belonging to a certain like culture would be, I would literally find out exactly like what the colors that came in and how it was
Right.
woven and stuff like that, because I'm like that. So
Mm.
I've been looking up other things as well, a lot of Russian history, um, various things about how about the uh, essentially the history of the Russians who fled to France after the
Oh, yeah.
Revolution.
Right.
That's part of it, and then
Mm.
of course the history of vampires in Chicago. And I kind of have, I mean, now granted, I mean, I live in the Chicago area, so, but I'm sort of intertwining the history in with the actual history of the city.
Okay.
So that's part of it as well. But mostly, but yeah, mostly that I've had to look up Neolithic things. So I'm not particularly, I don't know a lot about Neolithic like times. And so I don't
Right.
want to like screw the pooch too hard.
Right. Right.
I mean, there has to be some plausible, like, yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yes, there were woolly mammoths and saber-tooth tigers.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, we've talked a lot about your writing, your style, your upcoming release. Again, that is called Frostbite, which sounds super exciting. And I will post the purchase link in the show notes. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about you personally. And so, because most of us writers are also voracious readers, when you have spare time, which I have discovered becomes a lot harder when you're a writer to have more reading time, but what kind of stuff do you like to read in your spare time?
Well, okay, first of all, I
Hmm.
don't read very much, but there's a
Hmm.
caveat to that.
Okay.
I listen all the time.
Oh, audiobooks. Yeah.
And sort of, because I was going to like say this earlier, but we kind of got off track. But when I write, I listen to what I'm saying in my head as if it was being spoken in an audiobook.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And then when I edit, I also have it go on the thing where the word like reads in the horrible
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
dramatic voice. But it still catches things that I do not get by just reading.
Of
I
course. Of
read
course.
fast. I was taught how to speed read when I was in elementary school, and
Mm.
the way that they teach you speed reading is you skip words,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
all very well and good because you do get the context and it's fine. The bad thing though is it's not good for editing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to kind of slow myself down, and I do that by playing the thing. But yes, I'm a huge audio person. I have listened to audio since they were just on records.
Yeah.
Went from records to cassettes, from cassettes to DVDs, from DVDs to MP3s, and from that to
Right.
Audible, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm yeah, when it comes to voracious, I'm definitely a voracious listener.
That's cool.
And it's because I often need to do more than one thing at a time. The only time I generally read something is when it's not available in audio and I can't wait.
Right. Right.
That's about the only time I read something. Other than that, I will wait till it goes in audio because that's just kind of how I roll. But as
Hmm.
for my taste is extremely weirdly eclectic. So,
Oh.
of course, MM. I love MM,
Hmm.
obviously, and I have lots of MM on my on my thing. But I also like um, scientific history is like a huge thing that I love. If
Hmm.
it's scientific medical history, even better.
Oh my God, I have a really good friend who is like, she writes nonfiction medical history stuff. Her name is Brandy Schillace.
Well,
And
I obviously need to look her books up.
yes, you totally do. And she's friends with Lindsay Fitzharris, who wrote the one about uh oh, what's his name? Burke, that the guy in the UK who did all the medical experimentation on
Oh,
corpses.
yes, 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 yes.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, see, totally my bag, totally my bag.
Yeah.
I like a lot of English stuff, and so I listen. In fact, occasionally I'll have to like take something out of my vocabulary because it's British.
Oh.
I have Britishisms, and it's because I read or listen to, I guess, so much that's British
Mhm.
like in origin. I know a lot of people that don't like stuff that's British, and I don't quite understand why. But
Yeah.
one of my favorite writers is a fantasy writer named Terry Pratchett, who's
Yep.
like big like Stephen King in England.
Oh, yes.
Only he's fantasy, not horror, obviously.
Yeah.
But brilliant, absolute brilliant writer. I learned so much about life just like
Mm.
books. And then I like other urban fantasy people like Shauna McGuire and Alona Andrews
Oh,
and
sure. Mm-hmm.
oh my god, I'm trying to think of the one that I just listened to. She does the Dragon DMZ books. Rachel Aaron. Rachel Aaron.
Mm.
Um, I'm a sucker for a dragon book. So yeah, I'll read. If I'm not reading MM, it's almost always going to be either some sort of fantasy or urban fantasy, or it's going to
Mm.
be some sort of something that's like medical scientific, or it will be horror.
Right. Oh,
I
interesting.
do read quite a bit of horror. Of course, I'm a huge
Mm.
Stephen King fan. I think he is one of the best he does the best characterizations probably
Mm.
of any contemporary writer. Yeah, he's a little weak on plot. He's extremely weak on endings,
Yeah.
but his characters are so real that you
Mm.
kind of just don't care
Mm. Mm.
because his characters are just so they're like real people. He somehow makes them into real people. And that's one thing that I've really tried to study is how he does that, how he makes
Yeah.
people into like real people, not just like two-dimensional images on a
Right.
kind of thing. So
Right.
and I like okay, I'll give you an example because occasionally my things do overlap.
Mm.
Uh Lily Morton and
Oh, yeah.
her blue books
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
because those are all ghosty books. And
Yeah.
in fact, the most recent one I was listening to it while I was driving to work, which is at night, and I was actually getting a little like I was getting the I hope there's nothing in the back of my car.
Right.
I was like, congratulations, you actually scared me, goaty.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's probably the
Oh,
main
cool.
whatever. I mean, there's some like other stuff in there too floating around, but that's
Yeah.
the main
Yeah. Yeah, I love horror, but I'm more of a horror movie fan than a horror fiction reader. Uh
I like the books better than I like the movies. And you'll
mm.
probably find this hilarious or you'll appreciate it. There is a great horror podcast called Random Horror Generator number 9. And
Okay.
it's done by the same guys that do Welcome to Night Vale.
Oh.
And what they do is the one guy is really, really into horror movies, and the other one was like new to it. Although it's been like 200 episodes, so he's not new to it anymore.
No, not anymore.
The way they choose their movie is they have a style die and a monster die, and so they'll have six different like scenarios and six different monsters, and they roll, and then they come up with movies that fit that particular
Oh.
whatever. And I hardly ever watch the movies in question. I have a
Yeah.
hard time with like this body horror especially is very difficult for me. Body horror there's a
Mm.
reason I went into pharmacy, and a large part of it is the fact that I like they asked me to watch a surgery when I was doing my hospital rotations, and I'm like, do I gotta? And they were
Right.
like, nobody's ever said no before. And I'm like, look, I'm either
Uh-huh.
gonna like sit there and close my eyes the entire time, or I'm gonna watch and probably pass out, or you can find something else for me to do. So they found
Right.
something else for me to do. I can't do body horror. I just cannot.
Mm.
So as much as I appreciate the movies though. And so
Yeah.
discussing these movies because they totally spoil the whole thing, which I am fine with. And in fact, a couple of them I've actually watched after.
Well,
That
it's scary once they've been spoiled for,
it's not
yeah.
even so much the scariness, it's the what am I getting myself into?
Oh, sure, sure.
Yes, and that often but at any rate, I love listening to these guys talk about horror movies. I love it. I
Mm-hmm.
love it more than watching the horror movie.
Well, I'll have to
So
check that out. Yeah, I also like if you like that one, you might want to also check out it's called the Faculty of Horror podcast, and it's
ooh,
a women run podcast where they dish thoughts on horror movies
that sounds
together.
awesome. I will definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'll put a link in the show notes for listeners if they're interested too. Um, okay, well, I know we're getting a little low on our time here, so let me see here. Okay, well, I definitely want to ask. I ask a fair number of my guests, not all of them, but because we write romance, obviously, I am always interested in whether or not you believe in love at first sight, because this is obviously a trope that occurs a lot in romance fiction. Do you think it's just a fictional fantasy or is it a reality?
Um, okay, so I have a sort of complex answer to this. I
Ooh, okay.
definitely believe in lust at first sight. I think that's
Mm,
that is a thing.
yes.
Um, and I also believe in not so much love as compatibility at first meeting.
Ooh, okay. Interesting.
And
Yeah.
that's for it's not exactly first sight, but it's like you start talking to a person, and the first time you've ever talked to them, you realize you're going to be friends with this person for the rest of your life. Or in some cases, I'm going to be like with this person for the rest of my life, or
Right.
whatever. And
Right.
so that I believe in, that I completely believe in. Love, I
Mm,
think, comes with time,
yeah.
because
Mhm.
love and they're different things.
Right.
So there you go. But yeah, that's my opinion. Is yes, you
Mm,
can have compatibility at first bite.
okay. Yeah, I
And
mean,
I
I'm
like
always,
characters that totally complete each other. Like
yeah.
that like they basically I joked once that I like writing characters that are useless for everybody in the entire world except for each other.
That's great. Well, I mean, I feel like that makes their connection even more powerful, right? When you're
Yeah.
like, oh, there's nobody else that could
Yeah.
like work for this person or persons. Yeah, I love that. Well, we're getting to our kind of closing, which is when I always like to ask authors to give our viewers a sort of sneak peek of what's ahead for you. So we've got Frostbite coming out here shortly, but what can we look forward to in the coming months from you?
Okay. Well, after Frostbite, it's up in the air. I have a couple of projects that could potentially fit in, and I have not 100% decided what it's going to be.
Okay.
I've got a last book in my Oleander series. I have the last book to write. And I'm about like 30K into that. And I've got there's a fantasy magical universe that I wrote a
Mm.
short story about, that I would like to write a novel set in that universe.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's another possibility.
Cool.
And there's another one too that I'm completely going blank on, but it'll come back to me far later when it really won't help anybody.
Yeah.
So that we have mystery card for like the next book after that. And then my very last book of the year is going to be it's sort of a collaboration, but it's not really a shared world.
Mm.
It's just a group of authors where we're all doing a modern retake, modern MM retake on Shakespeare.
Ooh.
And
Oh,
I am
interesting.
doing Taming of the Shrew. My
Ah.
title is Kiss Me Kit.
Oh, nice. Okay, I love it. Oh, that'll be fun.
So yeah,
Mm,
that one I'm very much looking forward to as well. But there's going to be something in the middle. I just don't know what yet. I
well,
can't. I'm one
surprises.
of those people. I just cannot plan my entire year out. I gotta sort of like I gotta have some flexibility in there. I'm like, this is what I feel like writing, by God, and so this is what I'm going to write. And if you guys don't like it, too damn bad.
Nice. No, I think that's good. I mean, again, everybody's different. My number one Clifton strength is futuristic. So I tend to oh, I've got like the next 5 years figured out, right?
See, that's impressive. That I'm like, I don't. I'm not that. It's like literally, I'll get to like I've got like several books that, well, I shouldn't say several, but I've got a couple that I've got like maybe the first 20K written, and then I'm like, I need to write something else.
Oh,
But it's not crappy enough to throw away. It's just
sure.
I need to do something else. Sometimes it's just even an atmospheric thing. Um,
Mm.
the last book in my uh the North Shore series, which was Out of Control, was very
Mm.
hard to write.
Uh,
I'm very, very like happy with how it came out.
yeah.
The one character has had a very difficult life, and
Yeah.
I had to get in his head on a regular basis, and it was
Mm.
really hard, and it was very much, it was, so I had to put it down and pick it back up and put it down and
Yeah.
back up just because of that. And so that's part of the reason why some books take forever to write, because I just can't. I got to like put them down and then come back to them later.
So like, do you think, because like my theory is I have a similar kind of thing where I call myself a mood writer.
Yeah.
Because like I have to be in the right type of mood, and my general personality tends to skew a lot more toward a rom-com funny kind of mood, right?
Yeah.
But every now and again, I have something more serious I want to write, but I have to like I have to have something before and after that is not that serious
Yes.
because, yeah, for the same exact reason that if you're getting into the head of a character or you're dealing with like, violence or like danger that's like really intense for the characters and stuff. And yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, as a good example, the second book or the next book, excuse me, that I wrote
Mhm.
after Out of Control was Straight to the Heart, which is a Cinderfella story. And as my friend said,
Mm.
is the literary equivalent of drinking hot cocoa.
Love it. Love it.
It was like the opposite. The other one was hard and spiky and
Yeah.
worth it in the end. At least I think so. But
Yeah.
I hope so. But boy, it was hard. It was hard one.
Right.
And the other one is just like kind of sweet from beginning to end.
Right. Well,
Sometimes you just need to do that.
you do. You do. Like I really I am very amazed by the authors who can write darker, angstier stuff all the time.
Yeah,
Like
I could not.
I couldn't either, because it would bring me down too
Yes,
much,
it would
right?
bring me down.
And I can't read it all the time either. I tend to like I can read one and then I've got to like have
Yeah,
a palate cleanser or two of something much lighter, and so, and even some like if they go too dark, I can't really, it affects my mood too much.
yeah.
Uh,
I've had
but
to stop
I know that's not
quite a
the
bit.
same for everyone, right?
No, it totally isn't the same. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've already had anxiety and depression pretty much my whole life. I think a lot of writers do.
Right,
I suspect
right.
that's what leads us to writing, uh, or being artists in general. I think all artists have
Yeah,
mental issues. I think they go hand in hand, to be perfectly honest.
probably, yeah.
But that's the thing is also, it's like I can write like that sort of angst because I understand how it works. But at
Yeah.
the same time, it's very emotionally draining. And to write
Yes. Yeah.
sometimes it causes me huge amounts of anxiety. So
Mm,
I am a very much of a reader slash listener.
yeah.
Because of my anxiety, if I've already read it and I know how it goes,
Yes.
I'm more than happy to take that ride.
Yep. Oh, yes. Yes. I'm very similar. I have anxiety issues too. They're under good control, but like oftentimes when
Oh
I'm
yeah,
really
let's hear about
stressed,
better living through pharmaceuticals. Yes.
yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
as a pharmacist
100%.
fan.
Yes, it took me far longer to admit that I needed that pharmaceutical help than but I'm glad that I have it now because it's made a huge, huge impact. But yeah, I mean, I think like um, for me, it can just kind of really affect where my whole like headspace is at, and like for too long, right? So it can take a while to get out of it, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it
So
can. It's like if that happens or whatever, I will listen to the sweetest, fluffiest things that I can find.
right,
Already listened to
right,
times.
right.
I'll watch Emperor's New Groove. That
Oh,
never ever fails to cheer me
yeah.
up.
I have a number of comfort like movies, TV shows, things I go back to when I need that.
Or Turning Red. Turning Red also is like a big comfort
Mm.
watch. I
Oh,
think it's because
nice.
it's a big fuzzy panda.
Right.
And see, I would be the friend who would be like, Fluffy! That would be me. That totally would be. Yes.
Well,
So,
and I think as somebody who, like you, I have a lot of those kind of comfort go-to type of things. I know I've been like really touched when I've had some readers tell me, oh, your books are comfort reads for me. Whenever I'm feeling down, I'll go back and reread,
oh yeah.
um, something that I've
That
read.
I totally have no problem believing whatsoever.
Oh, well, have you had readers, have you had anything really particularly wonderful readers have ever told you
Yeah,
that has
I actually
been
have.
really, yeah,
I
I'd love to hear it.
believe it or not, I've had a couple people that tell me that Damage Control is like they've reread it several times, and I'm kind of like, Jesus God. I mean, okay,
At
now granted,
180K, wow,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
impressive.
there is, well, okay, for 180K, I will say I shopped it to like 10 people
Yeah.
saying, where and what do I cut? And all 10
Mm,
came back and said, I
don't
don't
know.
have anything to cut.
Yeah.
So it does move very fast. It's
Nice.
180K, but there
Yeah.
is some plot going on, and it
Right.
moves. It's very talky too. There's a lot of conversation, and
Right.
that does take up
Yeah.
space as far as that
Nice.
goes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of it that's very, very like light and funny, but there's
Yeah.
also some very dark stuff in there too.
Sure.
So I'm kind of like, I don't know about a comfort read. Of course, but as an actual comfort read, a lot of people the Dragon books.
Yes.
In fact,
Yeah.
my favorite of the Dragon books is also a lot of other people's favorite of the Dragon books, which is Bond.
Yep.
Bond is by far Everard is my baby, and I will claim him forever because I not only do I love the angry twink, but I also love the like just the fucking dick. The ones that are just a dick. And you like want to like smack them, and what you need to do is basically give them their own book and put them through hell and then give them what they want. Essentially. But yes, I just but Everard the only problem though is Everard never stops being a dick, and that's part of the
Right.
joy of Everard, really, is because we put him in every single book for a reason. Okay. I mean, yes, he's the doctor and that's convenient,
Right.
but
Right.
Everard is funny because
Yeah.
he's such a dick.
Right.
And so that book was so much fun to write. I think my
Mm,
second favorite in that one would be Peregrine.
yeah. Oh,
That was
okay.
a very much that took a lot of plotting. We had to do a lot of because it was very it was the only book.
Historical.
It's well, yeah, it was the only book we ever wrote that was not pantsed completely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I very much got um into oh my god, I'm so bad. I'm like getting old and Perry's husband, Sebastian.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Sebastian, I really
I'm
got
I'm horrible at remembering
oh no,
names.
no,
Terrible.
exactly. I very much got into Sebastian's like head and had a very good time writing about this sort of gruff um man who doesn't show a lot of emotions but is really a big huge old cream puff.
Right. Right. I love that.
Will do
Yeah.
anything for his Perry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed writing that one as well. Those are my two favorites.
Nice.
They were all good. They all had their high points, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Lynn, this has been so much fun. I feel
it
like we could
has
probably
been.
talk for several more hours, and we will get an opportunity to talk on the Rainbow Readers Cruise
Oh,
this
definitely.
summer. So both of us will be looking forward to seeing any of our viewers who are able to join
Indeed.
us on that. But thank you so much for your time. And to all my viewers, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. Bye.